thank you, Paul, and thank you to the Blessington History Society for having me back and for such a great crowd again. That means I didn't bore you too much the last time, so that's good. So it should be myself and Andrew. You might remember last year I had a very tall gentleman friend. He's excavating in Galway at the moment, so it's too much of a commute for him to come down. But he did help with all the slides, so I have to thank him for all his help. Just before I start, the little cute skeleton in the top right, there will be human remains slides. So if you don't see them, I'll give you a heads up and you can just close your eyes so that you can. So I just have to give you that heads up. So we'll dive straight in. So it maybe worked here in 2022, which is terrifying that it's been 2 years. Basically what we did up where Sorrel Woods, I think, here in North. So we came in pre-development, which we do all across the country. We did a geophysical survey of the area we wanted to build the houses. We did test trenching and we found all this archaeology. So we found a huge rectangular enclosure, 2 annex ditches, about 100 pits, linear gullies and trenches and post holes and everything you could ever think of in this one area. So we were here, I think we were 4 months digging. It feels so long ago now. And it was a team of 10 to 12 people. And it was in the hottest summer I think we've had in a long time, so digging that ditch was definitely lots of items. So from that excavation, we had 2,000 contacts, so that's basically pits, post holes, ditches. We found all kinds of artifacts, clay pipes, glass, metal, lignite, a lot of stone artifacts, prehistoric lithics, prehistoric pottery, bone artifacts, metalworking waste, animal bone, everything you could think of, we were finding it. You can see the bottom left box of the animal bone, the next one over, all the stone artifacts, lots of pouring stones, and soil. How many samples? I think it took 179 soil samples. So all those soil samples had to be literally washed. You just wash the silt off it and you see what's left behind. So that's why it's taken us so long to get here. The title was Some Results, but we still aren't finished. So if anybody wants to go back to college and study prehistoric pottery or charcoal or animal bone, please do, because we desperately need specialists. So what did we learn from taking all these samples? So the earliest activity that we found, so we knew there were prehistoric pits. There was bird bone in them and pottery, so we put 2 and 2 together and assumed there were Bronze Age cremation pits. We were completely wrong. The bird bone was animal bone, and they're actually late Neolithic waste pits. So earlier again, so you were talking about megalithic tombs, Paul, so now we're back to that period. So we found grooved ware pottery. You can see the dates, they're very nice, old dates. So grooved ware pottery is flat-bottomed Neolithic. It has the grooves along the top. You can see some drawings from Orkney, which is where it originated. You can see Irwin, I think that's Andrew's hand, with the grooves along the top, and then geometric kind of concentric lines. So it fits in perfectly. Our timeline and the timeline of grooved ware fits in perfect together. Then also in those waste pits, lots of hazelnuts, but with no seeds. And the charcoal indicates that it was mainly oak and hazel the reason for firewood. So that gives you an idea of the woodland around Blessington in the Neolithic period. There would be nice oak trees, apple trees, elder trees, ash, and beech. And notice all the exclamation marks. This is the first really cool thing to come out. There's a couple of really cool results. This is the first one. It was always thought that beech was introduced to Ireland in the 16th century AD, the post-medieval period. But Paul records show that it has been in Ireland, but it could never prove was a prehistoric. So now we have the oldest known beech charcoal in Ireland came from Blessington. So congratulations, we have proven that there were beech trees in Ireland, so that's a lovely beech tree there. The most common lithic we found were scrapers, hollow scrapers, end scrapers, side scrapers, end-to-end side scrapers, and a few flint knives, like the one up in the corner. And that's one of our waste pits. That is not a cremation pit. So then after the prehistoric period, the main activity was early medieval. So we now know all those ditches and pits and post holes ranged from the mid-5th to the 10th century AD. Into some detail. So the main thing was that ginormous enclosure ditch. So while it's a ring fort, because it's early medieval, it's actually square or rectangular. So it's a square ring fort. And an oak grain from the base of the field shows it's 8th to 10th century. We found loads of artifacts from the ditch, some residual prehistoric flint artifacts, hammerstones, rubbing stones, lots of iron nails, some iron pins, copper alloy wires, and a copper alloy pin. We had a large farm assemblage, so we had all the domestics. We had pig, cow, sheep, goat, cat, dog, and some wild fauna, a fox. But unfortunately, animal bone is one of the specialist reports I don't have, so that's as much detail as I'm going to this time. But next year, I have more information for you. So I don't know if you remember the ditch. It was massive. It was about 3.5 meters wide, 2.5 meters deep. The entrance was at the southeast, and with lovely cobbled surface just on the inside. I think we dug about 80 meters of it, and that enclosed an area of, I think, 805 square meters. But if you look at the bottom image here, you can see across the road, the enclosure is still there. So the entire enclosure, I think, encloses 5,000 square meters. So my sister Googled for me, and I think that's 137 buses parked together, so it's a huge area. And I just found out on the drive over the hill to Blessington that that side of the road is phase 2 for Cairn Homes, and they just got planning permission. So now I have to dig the other side. So that's why we'll be back. So seeing as we only touched, I'd say we only got about 1/5 of the enclosure, just imagine what we're going to find on the other side. So then the interior to the enclosure, you can see the dates are very similar to the enclosure itself. The stars indicate dates that are still yet to come. So in the top right corner, that star is my lovely pony burial. So he hasn't been looked at by the specialist yet, and I don't have a date for him. But one of the linear features beside him is 8th to 9th century. Then we have 2 pits, 7th to 8th and 8th to early 9th. So they're all very contemporary with each other. We had a kiln on the inside, which is much earlier, 5th to 6th century. So you have to think, was there activity there before the enclosure ditch? And the second star is that great pit that was it was there before the enclosure, and that's another date I'm waiting on. So I'm really interested to get that date to see was there activity here before they dug the enclosure, like habitation activity. That kiln contained assemblage mainly of barley with some oat, it was 90% barley, and oak and hazel remains from firewood. So again, we still have an oak forest in Blessington. The big pit, that's 8th to 10th century, just seemed like a normal waste pit until we got some finds back. This is a horse bridle. I don't know any horses. It's like a snaffle bit. Does that make any sense to anyone? Anyway, it's to do with horses. And once we got it conserved, they realized if you look very closely, there's a zoomorphic terminal. So the 2 round bits are the eyes, and there's a snout. So it's basically a dragon or a dog. And when we showed it to our horse expert, she said it's definitely Norse. It's not Irish, it's not Hiberno Norse. The only other place something similar to that is seen is actually in Norway. So a Viking from Norway was in Blessington and left that behind, or sold it, or bought it. So that's really exciting. So there'll be lots of papers coming out of that, because it's the first time that anything like that's been found in Ireland or Britain. So that's very intriguing. And then outside the enclosure with the 2 annex ditches, you can see the dates again, 8th to 9th centuries, again contemporary with the main enclosure. Again, the star, I don't have the western annex date just yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be very similar. You might remember some of these slides. We're finding loads of lovely artifacts. Spindle whorls, we know they were making their own clothes. Quernstones were grinding their own grains. The yellow bead I'll talk about in a minute, and the bone comb. There was metalworking parts and a lovely stone lined kiln, which I'll talk about now in a second. So the early medieval jewellery, I think it's 6 intact lignite bracelets. They were fragments, but Ellie was able to put them back together again. Diameters ranging from 42 to 64, so 42 is actually tiny, so think maybe for children. Lignite iron jewellery can be defined as being undecorated but highly polished in circular ring form, typically with a D-shaped profile. It's the most common form of jewellery found on medieval sites, but you don't always find it. So for us to find 6 was very exciting. We also found 6 fragments of dress pins, but it was only the shank, so they're all broken. We didn't have any of the ring at the top, but that makes sense because you're not going to throw away a perfectly functional pin, so that's why they're all broken. So they could have been banana brooches, spiral, knob types, so we just never know. We just know that there were 6 pins, and the bead, the tiny, tiny bead, is actually made from glass, an attempted herringbone pattern in yellow paste. So we know that's a class 10 bead, and a similar one was found in Newtown, County Limerick, nearly identical to it. And again, Max Manning used a date range of late 6th to 9th century for these types of beads, and that fits perfectly with the pit where we found the bead. So we're kind of adding to the knowledge that these specialists have, and like, yeah, tick, it's still within the right range. The bone artifacts, we had 3 bone pins, again 8th to 10th century. They're basically just from pig, the lower fibula, the lower leg of pigs. And they could be dress accessories, needles, weaving tools. Pretty simple, but they're very sweet. A 1 bone comb, fragment again, 7th to 8th century. It's a type D comb, so it's a double-edged toothplate with 1 complete rivet hole, half another rivet hole. And the teeth are very highly polished, so we know that they were definitely using it to get the nits out of their hair. You can see a nice drawing of a type D comb from Roscommon, and ours is nearly identical. And that's just a nice 9th century law text. People or craftspeople that made bone artifacts were not considered high status. So there's 3 things that constitute a comb maker: raising a hand in contending for a bone, straightening a ram's horn by his breath without fire, chanting upon a dung hill so that all antlers, bones and horns that are below come up to the surface. So he's basically going to all the dung heaps trying to get all of the animal, but he makes such beautiful things from it. Then we had a load of stone artifacts, so that's a palette of all the cornerstones we had. So I think it was 48 in total, and the majority were cornerstones. 29 the major fragments come from querns and millstones, and all of them were Wicklow granite, so they were just falling apart after 100 years in the ground. We had 12 saddle cornerstones and 3 saddle rubber stones, and these are prehistoric, so again that fits in with our waste pits. And the earliest evidence outside the corners is Neolithic, so again, tick, that fits with our Neolithic activity. We had 17 rotary cornerstones, which are more early medieval, and we had both beehive and disc, and that's a nice disc from there that Eve just found. Then we loads of other small stone artifacts. We had hammer stones, sharpened stones, stone discs, and then tiles, because we actually dug a bit of the gardens for down to your house, which you'll see in a minute. But the next most interesting thing, perforated stones. So we found this lovely one, and we straight away thought loom weight or fishing weight. And then Ellie, our fine specialist, did a bit more research, and she found this guy, and he's actually a Neolithic mace head. So it could be residual. It was found in a feature that wasn't dated, of course, but they're nearly identical. So it's very exciting that that could actually be ceremonial rather than practical. So again, the Neolithic presence is growing on the site, even though we only had a few waste pits. So I love that. I think that's very cool. So then we had our stone-lined serial drying kiln that cut into the annex ditch. So the annex ditch had gone out of use. It had backfilled with soil. Sorry, and they came along and dug this lovely stone-lined kiln. So it's much later than the first one. It's now 7th to 9th century in the base of the fill. Then they also didn't clean it out very well because they left some of the seeds, and the top fill was a bit later. The firewood was firs, hazel, birch, apple tree, and oak. And our charcoal specialist Roshan said it's important to note that they were using firs, so there's probably very poor land around here that was gathering what they could for the firewood. And completely different to the first kiln, now with oats. It was hugely oats, with a little bit of barley. So I'm going to have to look into why they were eating more barley earlier, like 200 years earlier, and now it's oat. It had 7 distinct fills and a stone lining, and it incorporated a cornerstone and a large millstone fragment. You can see the big millstone is there. And the reuse or intentional inclusion of cornerstones at kilns is documented, so it's not the first time it's happened here. But I think it might be votive and connected to the importance of harvesting, where querns and drying kilns are equally important. So you can just see a nice reconstruction of how the kiln might have worked, and some old grippings. Then we had some metalworking, so we had the 2 hearths again cut into the annex ditch. Again, fits in perfectly with the enclosure. It's all very contemporary, all happening around the same time period. We had 84 kilos of slag, and the metalworking specialist is in Cork, so we had to drive all that really heavy metalworking waste down to Cork. But he loved the assemblage, and it was great. He said there's evidence for both primary bloom processing, so that's basically turning the ore into something you can work with, and then secondary blacksmithing, so turning the lump of metal into a knife or whatever other iron things, maybe iron pins. Again, Roisin said it was oak and firs that were used as fuel, so again she can see this repeated all across the site, that while there were oak trees around, there obviously wasn't a huge woodland, that people still had to use firs and just whatever was available. And randomly, she can't explain it, a huge amount of oak. There's more oats in the heart of the metalworking than there was in the kiln. So it's very curious what's going on, so it's another mystery I have to try and solve. Also quite unique, there was a granite 2-year fragment. So if you see the guy on the top using the bellows to blow the air into the kiln, if you have a wooden bellows, it's going to catch on fire. So you have this little cylinder, normally clay, that you put the bellows nozzle into so it doesn't catch on fire. But here we actually had a granite one, and clay, and we had some clay ones as well. But he thought it was very interesting. There was a granite one, smithing hard cakes, and with the clay 2 years stuck to it, and smithing cakes. So very nice that they were making all their own iron objects. And then we didn't expect it at all, but there's actually evidence that they were making their own bronze objects as well. And you can see it's slightly earlier, maybe overlapping a small bit. We weren't sure what it was at the time because it doesn't look like what it is, so that's a drawing of an actual crucible fragment. But it's a bag-shaped crucible, a small clay vessel that holds the metal placed in the furnace to melt the metal before casting. So Paul Rondeles did XRF analysis on it, and you can see from red vitrification, told him anyway, that it's for melting copper and tin, so it's for bronze. So that's very exciting, because that is quite high status, that you can make in your own, they could be making the bronze dress pins or anything a bit more high status than the iron. So then, just talking about our Viking links to Ross Riverside Rat Turtle. Have you all heard of Duflinnaskiri? I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. It's the Dublin hinterland when the Vikings started Dublin. So obviously Dublin was the first city, the first big town, so you have to feed them all. So it's basically the hinterland, you can see from the map. It goes all the way out to Naas and down to us, there's Rat Turtle, and then all the way up to Swords. So they basically think that it was a rural area, politically and economically controlled by Scandinavian Dublin. Supplied foodstuffs and raw materials, so like animal bone, everyday needs. But now the question is it inhabited and farmed by Hiberno Norse, or is it an Irish population who had a commercial agreement with Dublin? Were they settled or were they controlled? So that's always up in the air. And it's very hard to tell because there's such a similarity of material, culture of Dublin and rural Irish settlements. Like there's only so many ways you can make a bone pin, there's only so many ways you can make an iron blade, so it's very hard to differentiate between the two. You probably already know that Rat Turtle comes from the Norse family Torquil, and the Mac Turtle descendants featured prominently in 12th century Dublin. I think they were high up. So Torquil became Torquil in Irish, so Mac Turtle. So I bring that up because another talk I gave, again, probably 2 years ago, on the left is a site in Dublin, Naas, so Braddockstown North 1, very similar. It was a square fort, much smaller, and it was Naas at the time. It was the Irish royal site of the Ephraimites. We also had evidence of Hiberno Norse activity. You can see the lovely strap end, again very similar now to the horse bit. It's got the two eyes and the snout, so is it a dragon, is it a dog? It was modest to high status settlement, and the main activity was 6th to 10th century. So then if you compare that to us, we're only about 2 kilometres from Rat Turtle, lands of the Sons of Turkle. We have evidence of Norse activity, so it's not even Hiberno Norse, it's pure Viking. Again, as a contact or presence. Our site is so much bigger, you have to ask, was it a service provision settlement for Dublin? So is this where they gathered all the seeds, where they gathered all the animal bone, where they made bronze implements for people in Dublin? Did people come from Dublin and go shopping? here and bring all stuff back to Dublin. And again, a mid 7th to 10th century lifespan. So pretty similar, a little earlier in Callaghan. Okay, then we move on to the latest activity. So in phase 1, we went down close to Downshire House, like you mentioned earlier. So you see Rock's map of 1760. They had lovely geometric gardens and crow's feet and all kinds of cool stuff. And in the summer, I think it was 2018, when it was really dry, we could see all that because the ground was so parched. And then we came in and did testing, and we could confirm that all those park terraces and the beautiful garden were in fact there. So we've just dug a little bit at the north this last year. So we found wine glasses and things from the house like slates and all kind of debris, 18th century debris. And we'll be doing the rest now in phase 2. So we'll be digging all these garden areas sometime this year or next year. And we should find hopefully the base of the house, because you all know it was burned down in 1798 and completely demolished. So now the next slide has a skeleton, if anyone wants to avert your eyes. So what we also found, completely not expecting it, and up near the Neolithic pits actually, so far away from the house, were 2 skeletons. No one else was 2 side by side. We knew they were early medieval because they were lying on their back, they weren't all crouched, we knew it wasn't prehistoric. I don't know what are these 2 doing here? They're not in the church. It's this time period they should be in a churchyard. And we started excavating them, and I don't know if this video work. So we found, at this stage I had taken the front of his skull off, so apologies that he's missing his face. But we noticed there was something really weird just under his skull and his left ear, and that's me trying to expose it. So you'll see in a second, not what you ever expect to find on a skeleton, was a load of hair. So I think I did yelp a little. But it turns out it's probably, that's me going, turn it off. It looks like it's probably a wig, like a wig piece that was just attached to him. So there was a bit of leather, a bit of lead, and a little bit of wood on the inside. So I should have put up a picture. I was Googling it, and they did just have these random things just attached to their own hair, just going down the side. So I don't know why it's rags. Well, it must just be the sandy nature. But that was on the man, so we're just like, what is it? But we think it's a wig. Get out of that. I'll go backwards, excuse me. Oh yeah, so then the same fella, so this is getting to, he doesn't have a name. On his pelvis, we noticed that he had 2 little buttons. So it's up to you, were they his knickers or were they his trousers? So they're handmade, they're 2 bone buttons. And again, they preserved very, very well. And then interestingly, they were both male, between 18 and 25 years old. That's all we can tell so far. But from their teeth, this guy, I don't know if you can see how chipped his front 2 teeth are. So he was doing some activity, either his job or his pastime, where he got his teeth chipped. And the other fella had a notch in his teeth, so he's definitely pulling like leather or something through his teeth. So whatever occupation they had, they were using their teeth. And it wasn't, sometimes clay pipes, you can see a big dent, but they're always sucking on a clay pipe. So it's not to do with clay pipe, it's definitely whatever job or occupation they had. So and they were in good health otherwise. Jenny said their bones were fine, they had no arthritis. They weren't doing any strenuous work, like they had no obvious signs of their elbows or their knees. But yet they were dead between 18 and 25. So your imagination was wild that they were involved in the fire in 1798, but they're definitely 18th century. Those buttons are 100% 18th century. So they're definitely associated with Downshire House. It's just, who are they? So I'm hoping there'll be some local records of 2 young men going missing or dying, or like you can't, why were they buried in the church? So it's all very mystery. It's very exciting. So just to recap, what we found so far from, like I said, we don't even have, I think we have another 10 dates coming. We have all the animal bone analysis to come. But we know so far that there was small scale latent lithic activity. Is it a mason? That could be amazing. Main activity of the early medieval, so 7th to 10th centuries, same time period as the Vikings. Is it a provision centre for the Vikings? Huge amount of charcoal. Poor Ocean had identified 1,717 charcoal fragments, 15 different species. So back in that period, both Neolithic and the early medieval, he has some fabulous variety of trees around there. And the oldest beech charcoal in Ireland, that'll also get a little publication. She said to make note that gorse being used as firewood, as well as oak and hazel, does suggest poor land, so it must be kind of boggy in places. A Viking horse bit exclamation marks, very exciting. 10,176 seeds, so they were eating a lot, farming a lot. Again, 23 different species. We saw mainly barley early on, and then mainly oat. Metalworking shows inhabitants were making their own bronze and iron implements, and we've the intriguing burials, which are probably associated with Downshire House. So then, what's to come? So the lithics analysis, all those flints, the prehistoric flints, the prehistoric pottery, we still need more analysis to see, can we do residue analysis, was it used to hold barley, or animal bone, or animal food. The animal bone analysis itself, we know we definitely had loads of horses. We've my little pony, so now we know that the Viking horse bit was there. They become a little bit more important. There are more dates coming, so that's exciting. All the finds have to be drawn. I have to do loads more research now on Viking links, more research on everything, and I have to mentally prepare for phase 2, which is the big ditch again, across the road, and then all the garden features of Downshire House. I flew through that, sorry. All of a sudden I got very nervous, but thank you very much for listening.